It sounds okay? Okay. Welcome, everyone. Thank you, Ben. Um, I would also just like to qualify Ben's introduction that I consider myself certainly not a monk. And I don't even usually consider myself a Buddhist teacher. I consider myself a practitioner. And I've been a practitioner for about 25 years, and it's been a beautiful central thread in my life and certainly in the spiritual path of my life. So I'm delighted whenever I get to share it, as is a great opportunity this morning. And it was wonderful to sit in the service this morning. It's not something that I usually do. And it was very moving to the heart and thought-provoking and challenging with these kind of complex human issues that we have, such as loving one's enemies or even having enemies, and how do we navigate a world with these realities at this plane. So it was great for me to sit and think, well, what would be a Buddhist perspective on this, and what is the Buddhist answer to this? Not an answer, but a Buddhist approach to thinking about these issues. And I'll reveal those in the fourth session if you come to all fours, because I don't have answers now, but sitting with the questions is most important. One of the fundamental teachings of the Buddha, the person who we consider the Buddha, and Buddha is not a name. Buddha means one who is awakened, or the awakened one, or an awakened one. This historical Buddha, who lived probably 2,500 years ago, said repeatedly that his one teaching was about human suffering and the end of suffering. That's all that he was interested in teaching, how we suffer and how we can see our ways out of suffering. And so what Buddhism is a very elaborate, multifaceted, conceptual and emotional and spiritual system that deals with how do we live with suffering? How do we deal with suffering in our lives and in the world? I'm just spinning this now. I have my notes here, and I'm not following my notes, but I will. There's two main threads in Buddhist practice, and one thread would be considered the wisdom thread. The wisdom thread in Buddhist practice is seeing things how they really are. Seeing things in ourselves, in other people, in the world, in their true nature. One example of this is that everything is temporary. Everything is temporary. We get that intellectually, right? Most of us kind of know that as an idea. To actually live in the truth of that, to live in the truth of the temporariness of everything that has been created, it ceases. Everything that arises ceases. What would it mean to live in the truth that that's part of the nature of everything that is? That's an example of the wisdom strand of Buddhism, that we're actually trying to cultivate wisdom to see ourselves, to see our thoughts, to see the world around us from this perspective. The other crucial strand, which is simultaneous with it, is the compassion strand, the kindness strand. From one perspective, it doesn't matter what all of this is, because we're in it. And we're in it together, and there is suffering in it. So cultivating wisdom is one aspect of pursuit. Cultivating kindness, compassion, including the complexity of how do you offer loving kindness to those who one would consider one's enemies. that's certainly a main strand in Buddhist thinking too. There is no word religion in the traditions from which Buddhism arose. Religion is a word that comes from a Latin root in Western thinking. My understanding is that the root of the word religion is a binding or a yoke, which is which somehow morphed over time into a binding of reverence. But it's got its root in there. It's a yoke, Y-O-K-E. I tend to make lots of yokes in my own teaching. I can't help myself. Hopefully it works. In contrast, Buddhism would be considered a marga, which would have been the ancient word just for a path, a pathway. Marga is like you could, in India right now, there are streets that are such and such marga, as in a path or a side street. So a marga was considered a philosophical path, a philosophical spiritual, there was no word spiritual, just a way of being in the world. So we could consider Buddhism a religion on the one hand, and it's one of the world's great religions in terms of the number of people who practice it. And on the other hand, it's a philosophy, it's a psychology, it's a worldview, it's a set of ways of thinking about oneself and the world around us that is different from the usual automatic, habituated, usually unchallenged ways that we think about things, and particularly how we're in relationship to our own thoughts and our own feelings. Buddhism in the West right now has a very psychological flavor, as we live in a psychological world in the West. And as such, it's compatible with many other spiritual perspectives and many spiritual world views, including Christianity, including great teachings from great spiritual and moral traditions. So what I was delighted to be, when Ben and I first had conversations quite a while ago about the possibility of offering something for First Parish, and I was delighted at the opportunity to do so, what we've put together is that what I would like to offer is a combination over several meetings of several weeks of teaching about core concepts in Buddhism itself, just because I think as a religion, as a worldview, it's something that most of us know the name of and have ideas about, but little intricate knowledge of what it is and how it works, as well as how do we apply these teachings to everyday life? How can they help make us kinder, wiser, if possible, in the particular flavor of Buddhism that I am entrenched in, less reactive in one's own inner world, more able to step back and contemplate before taking quick, impulsive action in response to things. And one of the main practices in Buddhism is mindfulness. So mindfulness, the word in Pali, so I'll step back a moment. The oldest Buddhist teachings are in a language called Pali, P-A-L-I. And Pali is related to Sanskrit. And Pali is no longer an active language. And we don't know if it was ever a vernacular language or if it was the language of spiritual tradition only. It's the language of the earliest Buddhist writings. And we presume that it was the teachings also, but we don't even know that. So the word for mindfulness in Pali is sati, S-A-T-I. And I like sati. I like sati just in how mindfulness has become so ubiquitous a word and so ubiquitous a concept in the West that it can't help but be watered down, somewhat corporatized, if that's a word, commercialized. So sati just helps hold on to the. There's something quite precious about this very simple way of being in relationship to the world and ourselves. So the course that made sense to offer, which I would like to introduce in the next few moments, includes both a history of Buddhism and some general information about Buddhism, as well as an ongoing practice in sati, in mindfulness training, which is usually done in the context of meditation. So I'll get back to that in a moment, but first let me say a little more about the more content pieces of what I'd like to offer these next few weeks. Is first is an overview of what we mean when we talk about Buddhism, because there's actually very different ways of experiencing and practicing Buddhism in the world, as there is, of course, with Christianity, as there is with any major world denomination. So what characterizes, for example, Zen Buddhism, or Tibetan Buddhism, or Theravadan Buddhism, or Insight Buddhism, which is the lineage that I practice in and was trained in, and that's part of the Theravadan tradition. Where did these come from historically? How did they develop? Where are they practiced? What is the heart, or what is the essence of any of these traditions? Some of them are really colorful and have great, wonderful, exotic flavor. And there are aspects of Zen Buddhism, for example, that you just don't find in the other lineages. There are aspects in Tibetan Buddhism that you don't find in the other lineages. And yet, just as we talk about Buddhism the way we talk about Christianity, and if I would imagine even in this room there would be tremendous possibilities of how we would define that. I also wanted to, in that context, talk about the historical Buddha and the person who lived, what we know of his story, what we imagine of his story, what is central about his story, which is, by the way, that he was a person. He was an ordinary person. He was a prince, so he was kind of a person born of privilege, and yet he was not a divine being. He was not a particular emissary from a different spiritual realm. Central to Buddhism is that he was an ordinary human being who woke up, who found his way into seeing things as they really are and living from the heart as it really is. And as such, communicates that that's available to all of us. That by dint of our human birthright, we have these capacities within us. So I'd like to tell some about the story about the historical Buddha, the development of the different aspects of Buddhism. What are some core teachings in Buddhism? Because there's some really, from my perspective, beautiful and quite useful teachings that make up the heart of Buddhism about how we live with suffering, about how we live with temporariness, about how we live with the, and this is a more nuanced concept, but the intrinsic imperfection of everything. It might be a perfect imperfection, depending on where you draw the lines, but how do we live with the word dukkha? So I'm getting into a little bit of the teaching right now. Dukkha is a word that's used often in Buddhism. It's a core teaching, and it comes up in many, many different ways. And it's often translated as suffering. And it's the more nuanced understanding of dukkha is that it's like an intrinsic unsatisfactoriness or an inability of anything to offer ultimate satisfaction. as well as it's often used like a wheel out of balance. So 2,500-ish years ago, when these teachings were being formulated, we didn't have Mako or Meineke, or you couldn't take your chariot to be aligned at a shop that would get the wheels in perfect balance. And obviously we didn't have good wheels, and there were no cars. There were chariots. And if you imagine a chariot, probably with forged wheels of iron, so 4 wheels, I'm picturing a chariot right now. Never drove one myself. And if a wheel is out of balance, the whole ride is a little rickety. One of the translations of dukkha is a wheel out of balance. So the idea in this context is that everything has an intrinsic inability to satisfy us the way we ultimately yearn to be satisfied, or can touch the taste that what it would mean to live in an ideal way, in ideal relationships, in ideal congregation, in an ideal country, in ideal connection with others. We can kind of taste it, and we get it at moments, and we kind of think that maybe that's possible. And the profound teaching, I'll offer the word profound, from Buddhism is nothing is going to satisfy that way. Nothing is going to satisfy that way. And in a paradoxical way, a profound peace and harmony can come from embracing that nothing is going to get us there. If it is going to come there, it's going to come from within. And that's what's going to lead us to it. So, I'd like to spend some time talking about the key concepts of Buddhism, because there's just really rich ways to lead one's life. And then if there's time in the 4-week that we've set aside to do so, to also look at Buddhism and Christianity, and ways that they overlap there, and ways that the teachings are similar, can be similar. The other thread in the course is actual practice in mindfulness. And that's where I'd like to go right now. I'd like to spend some time with that. Sati, or mindfulness. So, mindfulness, a very quick definition I'd like to offer right now, is being present with what's happening as it's happening. Being awake into our lives in these moments. We can all do it if you choose, or we can all do it right now, just by plugging into our senses, listening, feeling, hearing, aware that thinking is happening. It's not difficult to do for about 20 seconds. For about 20 seconds, it's really, really easy. The challenge is, how do we train the mind to sustain it, to stay in the here and the now, over and over, because it's just not the way our minds are habituated to being. I've come to realize just in the past few weeks that if the aspiration is to live in the here and the now, I live mostly in the there and the then. And the there and the then could be yesterday or tomorrow. Tomorrow, of course, always imagined. Yesterday, rewriting it in my mind. Or it could be 14th century France, or it could be a philosophy, or it could be like the mind will go anywhere and basically will want to be anywhere except here and now. So the training of mindfulness meditation is bringing ourselves here and now. I think I'd like, if you're okay with it, I'd like to do it just for a few minutes to give a little taste of it. Thank you. So, if you'll join me in this experiment, please. In mindfulness meditation, there's 2 things we want to balance. We want to balance alertness with relaxation. So it's a state of being relaxed in the body and the mind. But there's also attentiveness, where the mind is as clear as we can make it be. We want it to be sharp. So the body should have some, I like to think of the pose as having some dignity in it, or some nobility in it. The spine may be a little straighter than we would usually do, but not rigid. Body symmetrical, feet on the floor, or wherever they're going to be, hands just relaxed in a way. Hands, I'm scared to put the microphone down that it's going to shriek, but hands can be together in your lap, or one hand's on your knee. In this tradition, it doesn't matter. And we bring the attention into the body, because the body is happening now. Body is happening now. Our thoughts are not a very good refuge in this way. Your eyes can be opened or closed, whichever you prefer, whatever feels better for you. And in these next few moments, I invite you to bring your awareness to your breath, not the idea of the breath, but the actual experience of feeling breath come in and go out. The mind is going to keep on thinking. That's not a problem. It's not a problem. No worries there. Just with gentle persistence, we follow the breath. We're not trying to make the breath do anything other than what it's doing. Thoughts probably arise. Emotions may be present. Body sensations may be present. It's all fine. It's all fine. A gentle persistence. And if you wish, and we're just doing this for another minute or so, you may want to expand the focus on your breath to being here. Just bringing awareness to being here. It might be through this process of hearing. Cars. My voice. Awareness of silence. It might be just through knowing that your body is sitting. One of the great meditation teachers of the 20th century in this tradition, a man named Ajahn Chah from Thailand, his main meditation instruction was sit and know you're sitting. Sit and know you're sitting. as you're ready, if your eyes are closed, feel free to open your eyes. Stay with your breath. Now, I have no idea what was actually going on inside your particular experience. Of course, I have no idea. It might have been tranquil and calm and peaceful and loving. It might have been busy and anxious and annoyed. It's all there. And yet in the room, even through those 2 minutes of silence that we did, there's something quite lovely that settles in the silence and in the shared silence and in the simple act of remembering to pay attention to the silence and to be present in it as it's unfolding. So as part of the 4-week offering, I'm delighted to offer instruction in meditation, and each session will involve some time engaged in the practice and questions and answers about that, and more instruction in that. When I said a few moments ago that we could all do it for 20 seconds, and then mastering it might take a lifetime afterwards, or more than one lifetime, depending on your perspective. It's really it's often described as a process that is so simple. I can give you literally the instructions to do it in 2 minutes. It is so simple, and it is not easy. It is both simple and not easy at the same time, and yet the instructions are a constant refinement of the core teaching of just be present here, now, with the breath, and dealing with the obstacles, the hindrances, the obscurations that get in the way. Not from a Buddhist tradition, but from just an Indian yogic tradition. A great 20th century teacher, Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj. The Maharaj is an honorific that's added. Sri Nisargadatta was his name. He was a shopkeeper in Bombay, and a shop would be a generous word for what it was. It was kind of like a cement stall where he sold small household goods, and he was a brilliant, wise being. So people came and listened to him talk about things all the time, and people published them in books. And one of the quotes that I remember is after a while, what you see is all there is love and its obscurations. Love and its obscurations. Love and everything that gets in the way of that, gets in the way of expressing that. Meditation, silence, the discipline of the practice is one of the ways to seeing and hopefully lifting the obscurations. Okay, I feel like I've talked a lot. So I'm curious if you have any questions or comments or thoughts about how you would, if you were interested in such an undertaking, in a 4-week process of looking at Buddhism and mindfulness, what would you like to be part of it? Because I have a general outline for it, and I'm happy to include things that you would like to see represented in it. Or if you have any questions at all about the topic or about the course, or about what we just did for 2 minutes or 3 minutes. Please, hi. Yes.
Could I say something? We're recording this, and so it's what I'm saying and what you said won't be picked up. So if you could just very briefly report.
Yes, thank you. So I'm sorry, I don't know your name. So what Alice just commented was that she's very interested in the different traditions within Buddhism and learning more about that and the nuances within the different traditions. And I'm happy to talk about that. I'm excited to talk about that some. And I will be, my tradition is the one that I know the best. Because it's the one that I've been immersed in for many years, but I've studied in some other traditions also, and I have enough of a handle of it, I think, that I can certainly present the general characteristics of each one. So thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that.
What led you to your interest in Buddhism? Maybe you expressed this earlier, I think.
Oh, thank you. Right. The question is, what led me to my interest in Buddhism? And I think there's two strands in that. One was kind of an academic strand of being interested in world religions. So I studied it as an academic course in college, and I would do some reading about Eastern religions and Western religions and kind of comparative religions. And I, through my 20s and 30s, kind of every now and then thought, I should meditate. I want to meditate. It would be good for me if I meditated. I just had it as this idea that, oh yeah, meditation sounds cool and it sounds like it might be helpful. So every now and then I would remember to go and try something. I would visit this lineage in Buddhism or something else, and I would try meditation, and none of them stuck and none of them landed. And then but I was drawn enough that I was seeking it out to experiment. And then I landed at the beginners group, a drop-in group at the beginner for beginning meditators at the Cambridge Insight Meditation Center. And the teacher of that course was a woman named Narayan, who immediately I just wanted to be around her, and I was fascinated by her, and I was drawn to being in her presence. She has had and has just a kind of a magnificent presence. I felt like she was ethereal and gossamer. It was like she was as close as a human being had come to translucent as I had ever experienced. There was something quite compelling and refined about her and her practice. And I'm a clinical psychologist by training, and I had studied clinical psych. I have a doctorate in it, and I was working as a therapist. So I considered myself knowing the mind or thinking about the mind a lot. And the things that she was saying in a beginner's workshop about our relationship to our own thoughts and our relationship to our own feelings and our relationship basically to what arises within us was so counterintuitive and yet so intuitive at the same time. It was counterintuitive to anything that I had thought about before, and yet it made so much sense about how we deal with relationship, again, primarily with our own thoughts, that I thought there's something very valuable for me to learn here. And I was drawn, I have a very busy mind, as many of us do, kind of a mind that will not be quiet, a mind that I thought was a little too active and a little too, quieting is not such an easy thing to do. And I was drawn to the radical simplicity of this style of meditation, which does not involve visualization. It does not involve mantra or repeating words over and over. It's not usually guided. If there is guidance, it's very gently guided. It's simply quieting down and being with the breath, being with this moment, being with hearing, being with whatever's arising. And I trusted that there was value in there for me, even though I couldn't feel it right away for a long, long time. Deeper value I couldn't feel for years. But I trusted her, I trusted the wisdom, the intuitive wisdom of what I was being taught. And I liked the fact that it was just going into quiet and what I was learning from that. And then it took years, but it became a foundational cornerstone of my life, my daily life, and extensive retreat practice also. Thank you. Thank you for the question. Other thoughts or comments or curiosities or answers? Because if there are answers, that's always appreciated. But please.
Perhaps a curiosity. I would give two examples, but they're around the interplay between spiritual teachings and practice and the politics and power relationships as they play out in real life. A long time ago, I lived in Sri Lanka for a year and a half and studied Buddhism quite intensively then. Arrived just at the time that the Prime Minister was assassinated. Sri Lanka is about 80% Buddhist, 20% Tamil. There was tremendous tension in the country as to whether it was a Tamil who had killed the Buddhist Prime Minister. It wasn't. It was a Buddhist priest, which greatly relieved the tensions, but there were lots of sort of questions around that. Fast forward to what's going on now in Myanmar, where it's a primarily Buddhist country, I believe, and the Muslims have been, the Rohingyas, have been greatly mistreated, and there's a tension there between the Muslims and the Buddhists. Having lived quite a long time in Bangladesh, I feel that quite seriously too, and just recognize the tensions that exist. And if you were interested in talking about some of those things at some point, I would be very interested. I'm sorry that took so long.
Right.
To summarize.
I don't think I could repeat. I don't think I can repeat it word for word. But the question was about the tension between Buddhism as a spiritual path and challenges in Buddhist countries as a political entity, and when the politics mix with the spirit. And I love the question, and I don't have anything that I could add to it that would be anything other than a glib thought about it right now, although I'm still trying to think of something even as I say that. So what I would like to do is sit with a question. What I would say, the first blush of an answer is that as it is written, my understanding, so this is my understanding, a challenge of a lot of the Buddhist teachings is that they are individual, that they're about the individual liberation. Now, they deal with community also, and the whole concept of a bodhisattva is if you liberate yourself in order to alleviate the suffering of others. So in a spiritual way, it can be very communal, but that it's a problem to understand suffering only in individual context and as an individual thing rather than in communal and systemic ways. There's a huge strand of modern Buddhism which is called engaged Buddhism, and that's people who look at Buddhist principles in terms of how do we apply these principles to our global problems. And it starts with the fundamental Buddhist teachings that all separation is illusion. All separation is illusion. So the idea of the individual as a separate self is not. One has to be careful about reifying that too much because we're all interrelated. Engaged Buddhists will talk about easily breath. We breathe air. It's shared. We're all in it. We're giving back and forth, resources. I don't know if that speaks to your point directly about the challenges of the what happens when anything becomes a political structure, other than the dukkha principle also of that it's all imperfect.
It certainly does, but I apologize if it seems as if I was asking for an answer right now.
Oh.
I was just hoping you could perhaps weave it in.
Oh, yeah, thank you. That'll be an interesting challenge for me to think about. Yeah, thank you.
And
Right.
their political challenges here.
Yes.
I was going to say that a number of us in this room, a lot of us in this room are pretty political in that we have strong political feelings about human rights and justice. And it's hard not to get angry sometimes. Like, I know that this week I am especially angry about someone in the state of Georgia who I will never meet because it was a political situation. And I would like more guidance and better understanding of how to deal with anger around these situations. It's this righteous anger that I'm really good at righteous anger, of how to manage that better. Not today necessarily, but anger in the feelings.
Yeah, I heard a wonderful and complex sermon today on loving one's enemies. That was really, yeah.
Some people should be loved from a distance.
Yeah. Yeah, right. The question, if you couldn't hear it through the mic, is more about the complexity of wrong in the world, and unethical behavior in the world, and how to manage anger, and the whole concept of righteous anger, and sitting with the questions, I think, is so important rather than coming up with answers. One of the things that did come to me in the talk this morning was just remembering one teacher, one teaching which is attributed to an unknown Zen teacher, and Zen is a very kind of intellectually rich area of Buddhism, and Zen uses intellectual challenges, puzzles, koans, they're called, to work out knotty issues. And one Zen teacher saying, there is no right and there is no wrong, and right is right and wrong is wrong. And I keep on going back to holding the paradox of there is no right and there is no wrong, and right is right and wrong is wrong. And how do we live how do we live in a world that is not a rational world? And sometimes it's an irrational world, and sometimes it's an irrational world, where just rationality is not the relevant context or the relevant frame to look at things. It's trans-rational. It's beyond rationality. Appreciating the discussion.
Do you have any thoughts about the physical form the course will take? We'll meet here in this structure, and we'll also have a Zoom component for people that want to meet remotely. But is there anything you wanted to say about that?
And would you say when it is?
Yes. I like these easy questions. So, questions about the physical form of the course and when it is. So the easiest is when it is. It is from 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. on Sunday evenings starting next week. So it's the first and third, there's 4 sessions, so it's the first and third session in first and third Sunday in March, and the first and third Sunday in April. That's the when it is. In terms of the physical structure of the course, I actually defer to you and I defer to the congregation in terms of where and what makes the most sense. I would like something that's comfortable for people. This is okay, sitting in a more informal way would also be fine with me. Maybe somewhat preferable for me, but this would certainly work too.
So are you saying it's going to be hybrid, Steve?
A hybrid. It's being offered live and online too, is my understanding. Yeah, and I can add, you don't have to come to all 4 sessions. You don't have to come to all 4 sessions. They'll build on from one another in some ways, but you can come as you wish to be present or not for any or all of them. And there will be, again, some training in mindfulness practice in each of the sessions and questions and answers about that, as well as perhaps some training in another form of Buddhist meditation, which is meditation in loving kindness meditation.
Now, I'd just like to say that here, many of us are practicing in the tradition of Thich Nhat Hanh, who was very much into engaged Buddhism, and he's been said to be the one that brought engaged Buddhism to the West. And he is Zen master, but his Zen is not the Japanese Zen with the koans. So I think, many of us here are come to the meditation, which we've been doing for 11 years. And so it's a wonderful combination to hear you. And we did have a Theravada monk come from Thailand who came several times to sit with us, which was a really wonderful tradition. So I think that the combination of doing the meditation, which we do weekly at 4 on Tuesdays, and you're welcome to come, with this is just going to be very, very interesting.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm excited about that. And I'm delighted that you already also have a Sangha. Sangha is the Sanskrit and Pali word for community,
That's what we
a
call
meditation.
our Sangha, the
Yeah.
green field Sangha, based on the fact that we look out, when we sit in there, we look out at the green field and we watch it throughout the seasons as it changes. So we are the green field Sangha. In the summer, we sit underneath the maple trees outside, and that's really nice.
That's nice. Other thoughts, questions, curiosities? Okay. I thank you very much for your time and your interest. If you have anything you want to ask me one-on-one afterwards, you can feel free to do so, and feel free to join this exploration over the next several weeks.
Is there a registration then for this?
No.
There is no registration necessary for this. You can just show up.
Yeah, and we'll figure out whether we come up with a mailing list or something like that in the course. And there are issues of confidentiality and all that. We'll work all that out.
Right. And what Ben just said was issues of registration and a mailing list and confidentiality will be discussed in the course itself, probably in the first meeting next time. Certainly we can talk about confidentiality next time, because that's a good ground rule to start with. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.